when I was like 14 and 15, 16, right? Like pulling 25 people together, go and kill some boss and pick up some loot and got to connect with people from all over the world. It was like practicing leadership, and it doesn't really matter like what you look like or where you're from.
Growing up and your parents being like, don't talk to strangers on the internet, it's dangerous. And we ended up just doing that 24/7 now,
Making friends online. I thought that was like pretty invaluable skill. I mean, it served us obviously very well in this age, right? Look, we're talking right now.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the IDK Show. I'm Cindy from Bu Zhi DAO, and we're, a bunch of really cool founders and builders and creators in the space. One of our major goals this year is to host Taipei Blockchain Week, one of the first global crypto conferences in Taiwan. Our speakers include People Pleaser, Kevin Lin, Tom Schmidt. We're joined today by Ryan, a game economist at Delphi Digital, a writer at Metaversus, sharing insights and learning in the play-to-earn economy. I'd love to start with maybe how you got into investing in general and specifically why gaming.
Right. How did I get into gaming? Well, I began playing StarCraft when I was like 7 or 8 years old. So yeah, like that was kind of like my first like serious game, like 8 hours a day, like play all day kind of game. I just love playing games, like of all sorts. Spent multiple, probably tens of thousands of hours of my life playing games. My personal website, I list about like 80 or 90 games that, I've played that I probably can like talk through the mechanics of, right? And I think like if you're going to invest in games or just work in games, then you do have to have a passion for them somewhat. Getting into investing in general, I guess started 2019 was my first kind of venture role at Tribe Accelerator. It's like a Singapore government-supported accelerator, partnering up with like teams like BMW, IBM, Consensus to explore solutions for startups. It kind of came to a head when I was working in Web3 games. It's like basically working on tokenomics and working in game design as a software engineer, also gameplay engineer, right? While I was like working on these games, was writing sort of publicly on Metaversus to kind of get my thoughts around like gaming common design, like what Web3 games are, where it's gonna go, and all that like publicly, right? So that's when I built with a following, and one of my readers recommended me to Delphi, and that's how I got connected. And they were like, hey, you want to join? And I was like, yeah, I'll join, it's fun. Yeah, so that was kind of my journey. Yeah, so I've been in Delphi just about a year now. Quite a privilege to be able to work in games and spend time thinking about games and how the future of monetization in games that I like full time. So it's what I get to do all day.
I grew up playing games, and games like Stardew, maybe where I have to like strategize what I want to do that day. And I need to know, like what does each character like, and like what do I need to do to like level up there. I would take notes. I would write things. I would like, graph out what I want to do. But where did you kind of find that switch from kind of gaming to thinking about games analytically?
You just do, I don't think there was like a moment in time where I was like flip and think of it analytically. Game design as well as like an interest of mine. I read a lot of books about that, like watched a lot of like GDC, like prototype a lot of games, go to game jams, and of course like the Web3 side, which is, another interest of mine from like back from college days. With regards to the economic side, just reading books on econs, like incentives and the like those like pop econs books, right? Like Freakonomics, Undercover Economist. The writer of Dilbert, right? I think it's Scott Adams. So he talks about how like you don't need to be like top 0.1% in one thing. You can just be like top 1% or top 5% in a bunch of things. I'm not claiming I'm top 1%. Maybe I am. I don't know. But maybe out the general populace. But like top 1% of like in three things, and then like the intersection of that, right? So for him, like Dilbert, it was like, comedy. It was like, drawing comic books, and it was business, right? That kind of coalesced to become like Dilbert. And I suppose like for, the type of work I do, understanding like game design, understanding, economics, understanding like Web3 culture / blockchain technology, being generally chatty, I don't know, yeah, sociable.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting intersection of gaming and Web3. How important is these tokenomics mechanisms? Is that enough to kind of bring in new users, but also, keep pre-existing users interested? Or is that kind of just like, it is just what it is, like in the background, and what actually users are on there for is, like the actual graphics, the storyline, the marketing, the community. This
is advanced by people like Ralph Costa, of course, who's like a legendary game designer. Reddit, Ultima Online, Ultima, Star Wars Galaxies, and talks about how like, the fun part of a game is learning, right? And improving over time. You reach in the game, there's like not much more to learn. So you just that you can churn out, and that's fine. If you finish like Assassin's Creed, you finished it, right? The games where there's always a lot more to learn, that's when you have like a very long-lived game, right? An alternate approach to like building like a long-lived game would be to build many different games around where you can sort of keep the same friends and jump between those games, which is an approach like Crypto Unicorns, right? Or even Axie in the long run. Rav Costa actually helped me quit some games that I got very addicted to, because I was like, oh, I'm never learning anything. I'm just doing the same stuff over again. Okay, I should quit. I just quit.
For me, there's this one point where I was kind of feeling a little lost in life. Gaming and thinking, like, it helped me like process some thoughts. Clicked for me. I was like, wow, I'm spending a lot of time kind of organizing my day-to-day on this farm, like I'm thinking long-term. And then I was like, why am I not doing the same thing for myself IRL? Philosophically, I think when you also talk about like learning in game, is there maybe some learnings that you've noticed that you've taken from either specific games or just gaming in general that you've been able to take into your, everyday life?
It's a deep question. That's a deep question.
It looks like it's late at night for you. Good time to think about, existential stuff like that.
When I applied to college, the question was like, when do you argue with someone in a position of authority, and what do you argue about? So I talked about a time when I argued with my commanding officer in the army. He told me like, yeah, I used to play lots of games, but then when I went to the army, I enjoyed the army a lot and felt like it was a waste of time, so I just stopped, And I was like, that's not a waste of time. It's like a lot of cool stuff you can do learning games, right? The fact is, I got to connect with people from all over the world when I was like, a young kid, right? Like I was like leading raids when I was like 14 and 15, 16, right? Like pulling 25 people together to, go and kill some boss and pick up some loot. And I was like practicing leadership, being comfortable like speaking with these people like from all over the world. And it doesn't really matter like what you look like or where you're from. It just matters like whether you can contribute and how good you are, making friends online. I thought that was like pretty invaluable skill. I mean, it served us obviously very well in this age, right? Look, we're talking right now.
I feel like it's such a universal thing also growing up and your parents being like, don't talk to strangers on the internet. It's dangerous. And we ended up just doing that 24/7 now, I feel like one thing I did learn was also don't trust strangers. I remember one time on RuneScape, I don't remember what the forest is called. I think everyone's fallen for this trick. They were like, oh, follow me. Like, we're going to go on this journey or like, and I was like, let's do it. I was like exciting. I made a friend. Oh, no. And he ended up taking me to the forest that, was like player versus player. And and stabbed me in the back. And I was like, oh no, my two shrimp, my three logs.
500 gold pieces, my lobsters, oh no. And then in the future, when you're 30 or something, you're like the one who's like, all right, kid, let me mess you up.
And it's kind of taught us, the real world is not all rainbows.
Yeah, like little lessons like that, How do you like secure yourself in the virtual world?
Yeah, and I think like a lot of nostalgia plays into that as well. So it's very cool to see kind of these new games come out with that aspect, but using newer technology. And I think a lot of these games are, cross-generational. Like you were mentioning earlier, now we're the adults.
This is kind of why I'm excited to play games. Like, I know Star Atlas, I know it might take a while before they have like that full vision. I remember like being so excited to read their white paper because I felt like it would support all these like different social situations, right? Like, different worlds where people can just kind of, escape to. Not escape to so much, but like build friendships in, right? Having all these roles, different roles for people, right? Like people who are like, miners, people who want to, be a pirate and a bounty hunter, people who want to like protect these people. They can, act out these roles. And it's fun. Helping someone who's like, hey, I'm out of gas. Oh no, like I can't fly home. I'm like floating in space. There's a direction towards which we can expand, right? And I think that's like pretty promising. And I want to play. And I think if I want to play, probably other people want to play as well.
So I was reading through a couple of your Metaversus articles. It was like Axie's like crafting mechanisms.
Right. So I must make a correction. That was a guest post by Harang Ju, a postdoctorate at MIT.
Okay.
Two of his collaborators was the one. So shout out to them. Yeah, I wanted to provide them a platform to share.
That was a definitely very interesting article. And I'm really glad that you have that platform for people to be able to dive deep and share their thoughts within the gaming ecosystem right now, whether things are kind of working or not.
I think like if you're talking about on-chain data, the most fascinating, I guess is so charged, is Wolf Game so far. I do think like in the future there's going to be, theses written on Wolf game, like analyzing like time preference, just looking at like wool pouches that like emit wool over time. And that mechanic was designed purely because of an exploit, right? Like an exploit that happened with like emissions of wool. So they designed like the wool pouches that would emit wool over time as a compensation to those who the value of wool inflated away. So that was one. And then second is like look at revenue per user numbers of Wolf game and seeing how much they consume in battling and breeding new sheep and the like.
I personally didn't get into it as much, but I was definitely around when it's first launched and the hype that like took off for it.
I think people are drawn to like what's novel and what's interesting, right, about Web3 games. I'm drawing upon here like what Gabriel Layden said in Invest Like the Best, like Patrick O'Shaughnessy's podcast. The example that he uses is like a teleportation machine, right? If like someone invented a teleportation machine, even if it was like huge and like gooey and like, smelled bad and like pay like $10,000 to try it, people would like be lining up like, the entire like, queue, right? As long as it worked. Have something that's really interesting, people like don't mind if it's like really poor UX or poor like flow. That's the kind of phenomenon I think that we witnessed a bit like last year, right? With like Wolf Game and like Crypto Raiders and other games like that, like Crypto Unicorns, right? I think it was like novel enough back then, just like 1 year ago, to even just have like NFTs that, where that metadata updated. It was something that caught people's attention, right? It was novel, and then it's up to, I guess, the teams themselves to like carry on the ball, live services, live ops, and keeping the attention of player base. Part of the appeal might be, how Web3 can help on the viral side of things. There's this equation in Web2, like free to play. A few game designers, far more live service, live operations teams that, work on like affiliate, right, word of mouth growth, doing events, right, like keeping users engaged and active, right. This is an expertise that most, I think, Web3 teams don't have. The second piece is talking about like the customer acquisition cost, right? If I recruit one customer, does the customer or the user introduce this to their friends or bring on board their friends, right? Web3 is surprisingly good at with the community aspect, and it potentially will provide like a different alternative to paid advertising. I wouldn't say it's like a complete substitute, but I would say that it may boost your viral coefficient for growth of games.
I grew up playing a lot of Neopets, and the second they introduced like Neocash, I was kind of just like, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, why not trade Neo points for real world assets? So it actually just adds more like reason for me, like, or as a gamer to go on and play. Like gaming, it will just be much more like, much more integrated into everyday life.
Yeah, it become very dynamic, I think.
Yeah. You
mentioned Web3 is the future. What are you most excited about, like, that Web3 brings to games? And
I'm thinking of like literally just like Reddit as an example of how they started implementing like NFTs as but calling it collectibles, and then you can convert your Reddit points into tokens that you can then use for other things. It was very exciting to see. To me, like Reddit is kind of a game. Social media is kind of a game. You're collecting points. You're collecting, engagement or whatever. Clout farming.
Now we have teams like raising, 20, 50, 100, 500 mil, 2 billion valuations. Really ambitious, long-lived projects. You can grow faster and, build much bigger games and bigger universes, right? In the far corner, there's the, full like Web3 on-chain games like Dark Forest and the like that, experimenting with things like composability and like doing experiments like running blockchains for like a few weeks or months. Guilty Gyoza, 0x Park, Matchbox DAO, which we invested in. I think the thing to note here is that there are plenty of teams that are working behind the scenes that you can't really quite see. On the other hand, you have teams that are building fast and failing in public, and failing and succeeding, right, in public. And I don't think any approach is like wrong per se. It's just like they're harnessing different aspects, right? There are plenty of games, I guess, that have not like quite hit the news cycle because they've been building and working as we do to create new types of gameplay for us to enjoy. And that could explain a bit about like, okay, we don't have any interesting gameplay mechanics. Even in a Delphi research, like we put out a thesis like the future of crypto gaming, where we discussed like, what makes new projects hitting the holy grail of like having players play for free without feeling so pay to win, but then also creating some sort of level of excitement and, almost a method to bootstrap new esports, right? And not even like esports, like digital athletes. Digital blood sports, I think, is what some people say, which is
digital blood sports.
Yeah, blood sports. Like gladiators. Yeah.
Yeah. But digitally.
Yeah, digitally, right? And it's like permadeath and all these things. Yeah, there's like interesting types of games that can be achieved. It's just that they're not live, right? It's all like stuff being tested, the people are iterating on them. Building the infrastructure might take like 2 or 3 years or 4 years to build. I remember last year around this time we were promised many games. Turns out that teams take longer to build games, and games take longer to build, and we wait. It was an interesting time. It was a very interesting time.
Very nice talking to you. Very excited to continue this conversation of gaming and Web3 ecosystem in general.
Always.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. See you.
Thanks, Cindy. See you.
All 100 of us. You've got friends here.
你知不知道？你在不在？我不知道。